Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. The manhunt now over in Georgia. The triple shooting that left a golf pro dead and 2 more bodies found bound with tape in the back of a truck.
But with the suspect in custody, our investigators will continue to work the case to its completion.
Bodycam video capturing the moment officers in Kentucky rescue a 6-year-old girl from kidnapping. And why Chad Daybell is not being charged in the murder of Charles Vallow in the latest twist in the doomsday saga. Plus, contentious testimony from a defense expert in Bones, his opinion on the damage of 13-year-old Dylan Redwine's body and what caused it.
I don't have any idea what animals he would backpack.
And gruesome testimony from Robert Durst's trial, the millionaire explaining why he chopped up his neighbor's body.
I did not kill Morris Black. I did what I did.
Law and Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmeyer along with Terry Austin. Grisly new details in a triple shooting in Georgia after a golf pro was found dead on the golf course, and the bodies of 2 people were found in the back of a pickup truck. Police say their suspect is now behind bars.
The lone shooter, who's now been identified as Brian Anthony Roden. He has been charged for the murders of Eugene Seiler, Paul Pearson, and Henry Valdez.
Police in Georgia are announcing the arrest of the suspect in a triple homicide after the bodies of 3 people were discovered on a golf course. Roden is facing 3 counts of murder, 3 counts of aggravated assault, and 2 counts of kidnapping.
We literally had detectives that have worked around the clock, and some have literally slept in their offices since July 3rd.
Jail records show Roden was arrested early the morning following the shooting in a county nearby. The charges, DUI, false identification, and acquiring a license plate to conceal the identification of a vehicle. Roden bounded out 2 days later. Police are not commenting about what information they knew and when.
His name came up within a few days of the investigation.
The chief would not comment on a possible motive or chain of events that led up to the kidnapping. Roden allegedly driving onto the golf course with 2 bodies and shooting golf pro Gene Siller. In a newly released arrest warrant, investigators say Roden bound the hands, legs, and mouths of Valdez and Pearson with tape.
I think I would say that discovery of all individuals who were deceased was made in a pretty rapid time frame.
Joining us today is former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani and Terry Austin. Nima, as more and more information comes out, we get a better picture of the alleged crime. What do you think is next in the investigation of this triple homicide?
Brian, next is to figure out why Roden did it. We know he did it, but it's just really fascinating here. You got 2 victims, 2 of which have nothing to do with this golf course. They're not members of the country club. They're obviously probably killed before, their vehicle stolen, driven on the golf course. The 3rd poor victim did work for the golf course and happened to stumble upon this individual Roden having killed 2 people, and he was victimized as well. So, and then really what Law and Crime first reported, and credit to them, that Roden was arrested that evening for a DUI and a number of traffic violations. Why he was let go, he clearly wasn't a suspect at the time, but certainly days later, police were able to connect the dots, and now they need to connect everything to put him away for murder of 3 individuals.
Yeah, so many questions, especially when you talk about the victims here, of someone in their 40s and their 60s, different states, different cities. Terry, let's jump into the next question. It's a triple homicide. Do you think the death penalty could or even should be on the table?
I definitely think it could be on the table, Brian, because this took place in Georgia, and we know that Georgia has the death penalty, and they actually do use the death penalty. And you have to have certain aggravating factors, like, was this a heinous crime? And yes, it was. I mean, we know that at least 2 of the victims had their hands bound, and that is really a horrendous crime. And it's also multiple deaths. So that's another reason that they could, if they chose to, impose the death penalty. So we'll see what happens.
Absolutely, multiple deaths, and also the nature, probably when we get to eventually learn it, of the first 2 deaths may add to that calculus as to whether or not the death penalty will be added. Thank you both. Turning now to a major update in the doomsday cult duo saga, prosecutors in Arizona say Chad Daybell will not face charges in another murder linked to the couple. Chad Daybell and his wife Lori are currently in custody in Idaho on charges connected to the murders of Lori's two kids, 7-year-old JJ Vallow and 16-year-old Tylee Ryan, and the murder of Chad's wife, Tammy. But Lori is also now facing charges in the murder of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow. Vallow was shot and killed by Lori's brother, Alex Cox, who is now deceased. In a letter from the Maricopa County Attorney to Chandler, Arizona Police, prosecutors say they will not be charging Chad as well because there is no reasonable likelihood of conviction. Police have previously said that Chad and Lori believe Vallow had to die for them to fulfill the religious prophecy that included preparing for the end of the world. All right, Terry, you've been watching this since day one. Did you see this coming, that Chad Daybell wouldn't be charged, and why?
Well, I think that the prosecution doesn't have enough evidence, and I think it's a reasonable action on their part. There is no communication between Chad and Lori about the death of Charles Vallow, and you need something to bring the charges, and you absolutely need something to make the charges stick. So if they had telephone logs or if they had an eyewitness, and we know for a fact that Chad was not there, he wasn't present. So I think it's the right decision. I don't know if I anticipated it, but I do think it makes sense since they weren't able to find additional evidence to bring Chad into the whole series of events that led up to Charles Vallow's death.
All right, so Nima, my little public defender gears are kind of turning around in my head. I can see this definitely hurting Lori's other cases when she's found competent, but could Chad somehow turn these facts that he isn't charged here to his advantage?
Brian, I agree with Terry on this one. And Chad's only defense in this case is that Lori did it. The bodies are buried in his backyard. So we know there's going to be finger pointing. There's already been motions to sever these trials. Chad is going to go first because of Lori's competence issues, as you raised. And really, the only defense here is that Lori did it, and I didn't know that she did it. So the fact that she's now involved in another murder and he's not does help the defense. But still, I don't think this is a very strong defense case. The prosecution took their time, but this is more or less bulletproof, and I expect them both to be convicted.
Yeah, I think Chad's definitely going to use what I call the Shaggy defense. It wasn't me, but a lot of evidence pointing towards him. We'll see how that plays out. And to other top legal news, the father of Britney Spears fears growing public criticism against him and is making it known to the court. In documents, Jamie Spears says he is, quote, very concerned about the dangerous rhetoric surrounding his daughter's conservatorship. The pop icon made international headlines last month when she testified, calling the court-mandated arrangement abusive. Jamie Spears is now asking the court to deny a request by Jody Montgomery, the current conservator of the estate. She's asking that Britney Spears' money pay for her 24/7 security. A hearing in the conservatorship is scheduled for next week. R. Kelly's request to push back his trial date was granted in a hearing on Thursday. Judge Ann Donnelly set a trial date for August 18th, 9 days later than the previous date set. R. Kelly recently fired 2 of his attorneys in the weeks leading up to the trial. The newly hired defense team for the singer asked the judge to delay this upcoming trial so that they can be properly prepared for the case. The R&B singer faces federal sex trafficking charges and has been in the spotlight for sexual abuse allegations dating back more than 2 decades. Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, the rescue of a 6-year-old girl from kidnapping that's capturing all of our hearts. But first, vultures, coyotes, and insects, an expert in bones takes a stand for Mark Redwine's defense in the murder of his 13-year-old son. Welcome back. The state rests its case in the trial of Mark Redwine in California. And the defense begins its case with an expert in bones. Law and Crime's Anjanette Levy is here with what the expert had to say. Anjanette?
Yeah, Brian, the defense has been arguing throughout this trial that the damage to Dylan Redwine's skull was likely caused by an animal and maybe a person, but definitely not Mark Redwine.
By the time Dylan Redwine's remains had been discovered in 2013, he'd been missing for 7 months. All that was left was bones. Dylan's skull wasn't found until 2015, and it was damaged. Defense forensic pathologist Dr. Bruce Anderson gave his opinion.
This is breakage. This is quite consistent with post-mortem breakage from animal scavenging.
Dylan was on a court-ordered visit with his dad in November 2012 when he went missing. Diagrams show where his bones and belongings were found. His skull found a distance from his other bones.
there's really only two ways for that to happen. A person picks up the bones and takes it, or a canid picks up the bones and takes it. And I think it's probably more likely it's the animal and not the person.
The prosecution has said Mark Redwine moved his son's head and some marks were caused by a knife on the skull. Dr. Anderson said those were alterations, not cuts. On cross-examination, prosecutors questioned Dr. Anderson's claims.
You would agree that there's a question as to how Dylan Redwine was actually killed and ended up where he did.
I certainly can't bring anything to bear on that.
Dr. Anderson testified he didn't use a microscope with as high a magnification level as he usually would when examining Dylan's remains.
Would you agree with me that you couldn't determine whether a tool had caused it?
Yes, I'll agree to that.
And he became angry when asked about the condition of Dylan's clothing and personal items found on Middle Mountain Road.
I don't have any idea what animals do with backpacks.
Now, Dr. Anderson was actually caught on a hot mic after the court took a break, telling the defense attorney that he would not let the prosecutor get under his skin again. So he was going to kind of rein it in since he lost his temper under cross-examination. He also said with regard on redirect to that whole issue about using a higher powered microscope, he said that if he didn't feel he could have completed the examination thoroughly, he would have sought a higher powered microscope instead of the tool that he did use. Brian.
Thanks, Anjanette. Let's bring back former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani and Terry Austin to break down the defense's witness. Terry, vultures, coyotes, and insects. The defense expert gave reasons for so many different injuries. Do you think it raised any reasonable doubt?
Well, I think it raised some reasonable doubt, but I think this is a very smart jury. They've been asking questions all along, and they asked some very poignant questions here. They wanted to know whether the marks that this witness, Dr. Bruce Anderson, saw on the skull, was that natural? Was it caused by scavengers, or was it caused by some sort of instrument? So I thought they honed in right on the important part here. And frankly, I don't think as the defense's first witness, he made a very good impression. As Anjanette said, he was arrogant, he lost his cool, and I think the jury is recognizing this, and I think they're going to overall discount his testimony.
Now, Nima, could that, let's call it a bit of a personality defect, losing your cool, and some of the points that the prosecution raised, could that be a reason why this was picked apart by the prosecution in terms of what this expert put on the record?
Brian, again, I agree with Terry on this one. You know, Dr. Anderson got rattled. This is the defense's star witness. Their whole theory of the case was that Dylan walked out, 12, 13-year-old, and, was attacked by animals. And there's so much evidence in this case that favors the state. You got the blood in the house and the vehicle. You got the cadaver dog alerting. You got this really strange relationship between father and son. So, and the fact that the body was dismembered and miles apart, all that is really bad for the defense. So they really needed to come out the gate with a very strong witness that was going to support the theory that this was a wild animal attack. And I don't think Dr. Anderson did that, unfortunately, for the defense.
Absolutely not. And Jeanette, Dr. Anderson practices in Arizona typically. How long had it been since he's dealt with a case in Colorado?
He said it had actually been 32 years, so it had been quite a bit of time. He's used to examining the bodies, he said, or the remains, the bones, really, of people who crossed the border illegally and maybe died in the desert. So that's what he's used to dealing with. So it had been some time since he had dealt with an issue involving a set of bones in Colorado, where the topography is much different.
Interesting cases continuing to go on. Make sure to check out the Law&Crime Network for gavel-to-gavel coverage on the Mark Redwine trial. Coming up on Law&Crime Daily, reenacted testimony from accused murderer Robert Durst. Plus, how 30 minutes could change a life. The abduction and rescue of a little girl, the police body cam video you don't want to miss, next. Welcome back. A 6-year-old girl in Kentucky is now safe from a kidnapping attempt thanks to the quick thinking of an eyewitness and 2 police officers. Body camera video from a Louisville cop shows the officers rushing to the scene. A witness called 911 with a partial license plate number and detailed description. Less than 30 minutes later, they found the girl.
It's okay.
One of the officers opened the passenger side door, carrying her away from the suspect.
Oh my God.
The officer, taking 40-year-old Robbie Wilt into custody, records show Wilt later told the officers that he saw the girl playing near the street, circled the block, then took her.
Stay on the ground.
He reportedly went on to say the girl was crying and he realized what he had did was wrong, so he began to drive back as police arrived. He appears to have no relation to the victim. He's charged with kidnapping a minor and is being held on $1 million bond. Back with us to break down this heroic rescue is former federal prosecutor Nima Rahmani and co-host Terry Austin. Terry, your thoughts on how everyday people helped an officer's rescue of this young girl?
You know, we don't hear about these good stories enough, and I think it's wonderful that not only did we have the police responding so quickly, but we had these bystanders who not only made the 911 call, but they were smart enough to get the license plate. So kudos to everyone all around. Thank goodness this was thwarted.
And Nima, everyone home safe and sound. The officers got their person, the 6-year-old girl at home. Your reaction to the officers' quick thinking and jumping into action?
Outstanding work by these police officers. And, you know, as attorneys, we're in the business of misery. So we're often hearing about cases that have gone bad, you know, kidnapping, murder, those types of things. So the fact that the officers' quick thinking and those bystanders, good for them for getting involved. And this young child, 6-year-old, is safe at home. We got to give credit where credit is due. And this is a great story heading into the weekend.
Absolutely. Wishing all the best to that little girl and her family. Hopefully she's home safe and sound with those who love her. When we come back, the Galveston trial reenactment continues in California versus Robert Durst. Testimony from the real estate heir about dismembering his neighbor and the fear he felt when he knew he would be discovered. Welcome back. The Robert Durst murder trial is continuing with previous testimony from when the real estate heir was accused of murdering his neighbor, Morris Black. Robert Durst is currently facing murder charges relating to his best friend, Susan Berman, who was shot execution style in December 2000. He was previously on trial for the murder and dismemberment of Morris Black, his neighbor, in Galveston, Texas. Durst was later acquitted of murder by claiming self-defense. Transcripts from that trial are now being reenacted by attorneys and law students. Some of the most shocking cross-examination of Durst describing cutting up Black's body.
Morris Black's head off his torso.
Yes, sir.
Did you look with great detail at the pictures that showed the sawtooth marks on the bones, each and every one of his limbs?
Not with great detail, no, sir.
Now, did you do this cut up before you had the 5th of Jack Daniels or after you had the 5th Jack Daniels?
After I had the 5th of Jack Daniels.
You drank the whole 5th and then started cutting?
Almost all the 5th, yes, sir.
The testimony continued, including how he put his neighbor's body parts in garbage bags and dumped them in the Galveston Bay. He admits that he panicked when he returned to the bay and saw the bags floating.
But you agree you wanted those bags to sink and not be found, right?
Yes, sir.
When you came back Sunday and you saw them floating, you panicked, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
And the reality then was you were about to be discovered, weren't you, Mr. Durst?
When I saw the police there, I knew I had been discovered.
You knew that Morris Black was going to be identified, did you not?
Yes, sir.
You fully expected that, right?
Well, when I saw the police had found everything, yes, sir. Maybe I said hi.
Just killed this man in your apartment, and you look up and you wave and you say hi.
I did not kill Morris Black. I did what I did.
All right, Nima, let's make you the defense attorney for just a minute. Is there an argument that could help Durst against this testimony, or is it best to just ignore it and focus elsewhere?
Brian, I know why the prosecution is doing this. John Lewin wants to plant that seed in the juror's mind that even though he got off with that Houston jury, that this is a murderer, this isn't an old man who's in frail health. He's capable of killing someone and chopping up the body. But this may backfire because this is already a very long trial, and these jurors were expecting 4 to 5 months. It's going to go longer because of medical issues with respect to Durst that have delayed, and we've had some dark days. Judge Wyndham is allowing everything in, parts of the Jinx, maybe the whole Jinx, as well as All Good Things, a fictional movie. So this trial is really dragging on, and I can see the defense arguing, hey, we've already tried this, we've litigated it, he's been exonerated. You're wasting our time, prosecution. So this could potentially backfire, but I don't see any other way for the state to do this because this was their strongest case with respect to the evidence related to this murder, even though it resulted in an acquittal.
Yeah, John Lewin is definitely throwing everything in, and the kitchen sink, your kitchen sink, my kitchen sink, and Terry's, but we'll see how the jury can deliberate with this. Terry, at the very least, this testimony proves what Durst is capable of, but how does it prove that he killed Berman?
Well, it doesn't, but I think what Lewin is trying to do here is to show that if Durst is capable of actually chopping up someone's body, he needed to take a fifth to drink and go ahead and continue. That didn't really bother him that much. But if he's able to do that, then he is also able to shoot his best friend, Susan Berman, in the back of the head, execution style. So I understand why the prosecution is really trying to tie all these cases together. I agree with Nima. You want to make sure that the motive is there and that the jury understands he's connected to the disappearance of Kathy, he's connected to Morris Black, and obviously now Susan Berman, and it's all together. But the fact that he is spending so much time is wasting the jury's time, and I do think they will ultimately hold it against him. And I don't think that all of this detail, particularly in the Morris Black case, is going to, help the case at all. So I would stop.
Yeah. We'll see how this plays out. Thank you both. And thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.